Hello everyone, it is 13th week and today in this week we will try to finalize our discussion on international trade regime with the discussion on welfare effect of the arranging free trade agreement. And so again, till now, we have a short review of trade theory and also welfare analysis of trade policies. And we have seen that in majority cases, whatever trade policies by small economy always deteriorate social welfare, and even the trade policy by large economy also usually reduces social welfare. Then why are trade policy makers repeating that types of self-damaging, seemingly irrational trade policies? And we have seen that from the perspective of political economy of trade policies, economy of trade policies, we have seen that when each trade policy makers, basically politicians, try to maximize their political objective function, that is to maximize their political influence, political power, by getting maximum political support in the coming elections, we have seen that choosing protective trade policies is the best way in most cases to maximize their political power. So the only way to prevent the recurrent trade war as a result of those political decisions for protective trade policy is to introduce so-called multilateral free trade regimes. Currently, it takes the form of World Trade Organization. And although originally in Bretton Woods system, these multilateral trade regime intended to provide a kind of a credible enforcement mechanism that might work even in a one-shot game by imposing harsh enough punishment. We have seen that in real world that punishment imposed by WTO that is basically allowing a legal retaliation against kind of rule-breaking country actually cannot really work when those conflict happens between small and large economies. So in one-shot game, we can say that WTO might be regarded as a simple paper tiger. But however, when WTO works as a kind of trade forum for repeated game, we have seen that those reputation building mechanism, WTO as a reputation building mechanism itself works as a quite efficient, credible enforcement mechanism. Why? Since we have seen that in repeated game, when every country takes the form of a strategy of tit for tat or trigger strategies, they found out that to choose a free trade policy is the best policy, as long as they care about kind of future welfare in repeated game. And also we have seen that then why are we experiencing that outlying case of Donald Trump? And the best conjecture we can make is he never cares about tomorrow. All existing to him is just today's pleasure, and there is no tomorrow, no future welfare takes any room for him. And then also we have seen that the most important dominant principle of multilateral trade regime is so-called non-discrimination principle. Which takes the concrete form of most favored nation clause. And so there should be no discrimination against any member country of WTO. So all tariff should be applied or all trade policy should be applied at the exactly same level to all trading partner. That's the what we call as so-called MFN tariff. And however, we have seen that in reality there is some inconsistent feature of so-called preferential trade agreement, And so the preferential trade agreement, starting with the FTA, free trade agreement, provide remove all tariff barrier only with respect to its member country, while the same MFN tariffs are applied to the non-member country. Very discriminatory measure it is, a preferential, all different types of preferential trade agreement. But however, we have seen that this preferential trade agreement is regarded as a kind of exceptional case, when it can be considered as a measure toward eventual full economic integration, just like the German unifications. So those transitional integration should show exceptional case with so-called significant trade removal of all existing trade barriers, removal of tariff and non-tariff trade barriers, eventually targeting toward complete economic integration, trade barriers. That's what we have discussed last week. And the final issue would be, then, can you really say preferential trade agreement, including FTA, always improve our social welfare? That's what we will examine today. So let's have a very short discussion of welfare effect of preferential trade agreement, and let's start with welfare effect of the most the starting stage of preferential trade agreement, free trade agreement. And last week I gave you a homework to think about that. Let's say this is an output level, price level, and this is supply curve equals to marginal cost curve, demand curve. And if international price is given at this level, and the free trade, this international price will be adopted as a domestic price with no tariff. And then if tariff is imposed, for example, by a specific tariff this level, then this would be new domestic price level with MFN tariff, which is international price plus specific tariff. And given this situation, if we arrange a free trade agreement with Japan, and let's say this is the price level of Japan, and since we arrange a free trade agreement with Japan, we can find this tariff will be removed only with respect to Japan, while for all the other countries, same so-called this one, MFN, most favored nation clause tariff, which will be still imposed to all non-member country, and this tariff will be only removed to the FTA. Let's say, for example, we are talking about FTA with so while Korea-Japan FTA will improve social welfare or not, so after FTA, this Japanese price level would be new domestic price with FTA. And then we can see that domestic price level has gone down to a new domestic price, which is equal to Japanese price level. So as a result, we can see that before FTA, this was the original original production level before FTA. I'm confusing you. This was original. This was original production level before FTA, and this is new domestic price level after FTA. This is an after FTA, since domestic price has gone down to this much. And before FTA, this was the original demand level before FTA, and this is the new demand level after FTA. So we can say, as we did the exercise before, if we do the same exercise to evaluate the welfare effect of trade policy, we can give the number and repeat then the same exercise, but probably we need, shall we do that again? If you are not sure, probably we can do that, yeah. So before FTA, let's say the big triangle above the original domestic price would be number one. And let's say this area would be number two. Small area would be number three. This quadrangle 4. This triangle 5. And let's say this quadrangle below this domestic price after FTA would be 5, and the whole triangle below this domestic price after FTA, let's say, would be 6. Then we can do the same exercise. So so before FTA, that is when with MFN tariff imposed to all non-member country. And this is an after FTA. And this is change, impact of FTA. And first, let's think about consumer surplus. Before FTA, consumer surplus was the big triangle above the earlier domestic price, number one. And after FTA, domestic price has gone down to this level, and the whole big triangle above this new domestic price, red line, would be total consumer surplus. There is 1, plus 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so there has been big increase in consumer surplus. Then what about produce surplus? For produce surplus, before FTA, big triangle below the earlier domestic price would be consumer surplus. After consumer surplus, domestic price has gone down. So this one. So this is the reduced amount of the produce surplus and government surplus. We can see that before FTA, total amount of import was the total amount of import before FTA. So to this, with respect to this amount of import, this specific tariff was imposed. So tariff revenue was the summation of this big quadrangle would be total tariff revenue. After FTA, this tariff was removed with respect to Japan, since FTA is what preferential tariff removal with respect to Japan. So this tariff revenue will simply go away. So altogether, we can say when you look at social welfare, before FTA, total social welfare would be this one. And after FTA, we will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm sorry. After FTA, consumer surplus is just a big triangle above this domestic surplus. So this should go away. Yeah. Therefore, when we compare social welfare, we can see that after here we have 5. So this 5, 6, let's say this isn't 7. I made a mistake. 7. So government surplus would be 4, 2, 7. 7. 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 6, 7. Yeah, this should be right. So when we check the kind of change of welfare after tariff, what we can do is subtract all the earlier welfare from the welfare after tariff, and then we can see that here, after FTA, consumer surplus also includes 5 here, and so just 5 here. So what we will have is we have additional welfare 3 and 5, and loss by the amount of 7. So we can see that this welfare gains here, small welfare gain, this would be what? Welfare gain with what domestic production is reduced from this level to here. It is replaced by inefficient domestic producer by more efficient Japanese producer So this is what we can say, so-called welfare gain due to not production distortion. This is due to increase of production efficiency gain. In what sense of efficiency gain? Inefficient domestic production has been replaced by more efficient Japanese productions. And this is what another gain with domestic consumption has been increased to this much with this much lower domestic price. This number 5 is what so-called consumption efficiency increase. Consumption, not consumption loss, the opposite consumption efficiency gain with the lower domestic price. On the other end, we have also loss by this much. Where this loss comes from, we had altogether this total amount of earlier existing tariff revenue. Among those total revenue, above quadrangle 4 has been changed to increased amount of domestic welfare. Then the lower quadrangle number 7 is simply gone away. Why? Since so-called this trade partner has been diverted from more efficient world trade partner to less efficient FTA partner. So altogether, this production efficiency gain and consumption efficiency gain was created by this amount of increased amount of kind of trade with Japan. So altogether, these two gain, production efficiency gain, consumption efficiency gain, is added up to describe so-called, we call it trade creation effect. Since FTA with Japan, trade volume has been increased by this much. And this increased amount of trade with Japan has created this kind of production efficiency gain, consumption efficiency gain. Altogether, we call it trade creation effect, which is these above two terms. And this negative term came from what? Since trade partner has been changed from more efficient world trade partner to less efficient Japan, this is what we call trade diversion effect. Trade diversion effect, which is a negative term in our example. So we can say only when this creation effect is higher than trade diversion effect, we can say this FTA might be trade welfare improving. But however, as we can see from our example, this area seems to be larger than small blue triangle. So in case trade diversion effect is larger than trade creation effect, we can say actually our FTA with Japan will deteriorate our social welfare. So we can summarize this discussion in this way. The welfare effect FTA and this finding will be applied to all different types of preferential trade agreement only when trade creation effect, welfare gain due to the increased amount of trade after FTA is larger then trade diversion effect only in this case we can say FTA can improve social welfare. This would be so-called, we can call it static welfare effect. Static means what? Without considering the dynamic adjustment of our economy, only just after that FTA was activated, and as a result of price changes, we can expect this types of welfare effect instantly without considering dynamic adjustment of industry itself. So from the static perspective, only when trade creation effect is larger than trade diversion effect, we can say free trade can improve social welfare. Then, what about the case of a dynamic effect of dynamic effect of FTA or other types of more advanced preferential trade agreement? Means only when industry and economies as a whole, industries make dynamic adjustment toward high value adding sector, high value adding sectors. This FTA or PTA might improve social welfare, might improve social welfare. And the actual example we might find would be in 1992, European economies like the southern European countries like the Greece, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Greece, all those countries joined to the European Union with the free labor mobilities, and also they joined in much advanced economic integration called a single currency area, Eurozone. What happened to them? After that kind of sharp and rapid economic integrations, those Greek economy and Italian economy, Portugal economy try to specialize in the sector where they have comparative advantage at that moment, at that time. Where? Mainly kind of tourism industries and simple consumer products and food products, while since northern European countries like Germany and other kind of Scandinavian countries, UK, Germany, France, Netherlands, those countries had far advanced leaderships and comparative advantage in most manufacturing sectors, especially high valuating sectors, while Greek and Southern European economies simply specialize in the tourism industry and service sectors, mainly lower value-added sectors. And as a result, in early 21st century, those Southern European economies have suffered serious kind of economic downturn after their gradual specialization in low value adding sector instead of high value adding sectors. So we can say this arrangement of the FTA or preferential trade agreement would be, we can say, should be understood as a sword with the edge at both sides. So at the static level, we can say the trading partner, we can gain more gains when our trading partner is more efficient. But at the same time, in dynamic terms, after this arrangement of FTA, preferential, other types of preferential trade agreement, each economy should make their maximum efforts to make a dynamic adjustment toward high value adding sectors. That's very big lessons we can learn. And also we can think about the case of Mexico. Mexico declared moratorium of the FTA and any types of economic integration. Why? After they arranged FTA, they have actually recognized not real improvement of their welfare. They came to simply specialize in the sector with low value added labor intensive sectors. So they are trying to make a more strategic approach in arranging FTA. That's a very important lesson we should keep in mind already. And then let's finally move our final kind of topics of international trade negotiation. So altogether, the big title, trade theory and policies and international trade regimes. And then after figuring out all what's going on with the trade policies and what is the background of those mysterious self-damaging policy was adopted and what is the current stage of the international trade regimes. And then from now on, let's figure out how we can find best strategy, action to get back to old good days with the optimal trade negotiation strategies. Trade negotiation strategies, mainly using simple game theoretic approaches. And first, negotiation means what? Some decision is made based on our partners' argument and positions. Decision strategies is not made just based on my own consideration. It is very heavily, negotiation is affected by my negotiation partners' argument and positions and demands. So this is what we call so-called game situation, which game theory, as explained in game. What is the game? Let's think about the actual example of game, poker. In Korean, traditional Korean game, hwato, poker game. Or you can think about all different types of sports games, soccer game, tennis game, baseball game, and all different types of game. So what is the real fun from game? Game is not a lonely game, action. My best, why do we feel fun from game? Why do we feel fun from soccer game? Since only win. Well, some of you might feel it's a fun even if you lose from the game, but in most cases, we think the game is really fun, especially when we win the game. How can you win the game? Yes, it depends on our capacity, our skills in playing the game, but it does not solely depend on my own capacity, my own skill to play the game. The process to decide winner or loser is my relative skill and capacity to play the game and how I respond to my partner's strategies in each game, poker, auto, soccer, baseball, whatever. So a game is, you can say, game is the situation where so-called strategic decisions. Game is the so-called situation. Game is the situation where so-called strategic actions or strategic decisions where strategic decisions are made. By the way, what do we mean by strategic decision? Strategic decision means, or strategic actions. What do we mean by strategic decision or action? Strategic action means the action that try to maximize my welfare, taking consideration of what is then the next question is, what is strategic action? Strategic action is action or decision that try to maximize my welfare, considering the partner's action. Then, what do we mean by action that try to maximize my welfare, considering the partner's, competitor's action? And this considering means not just one-sided psychological considering, but that this considering means actually I take my action which will influence the other partner to choose the action that will maximize my welfare. So we can interpret what is the strategic action? We can define strategic action is action that induces the partner to choose the action that maximize my welfare. Why can we define in this way? Since my welfare is directly affected and influenced by the partner's action, so in that case, if you face any situation where my fortune, my welfare, my happiness is absolutely determined, affected by the other guys, the other partner's action, then how can I maximize my welfare? By arranging a situation, by inducing, by my own action, that will induce the other player, partner, to choose the action that eventually maximize my welfare, since my welfare is anyhow influenced by the other guys. So in soccer game, in poker game, in whatever tennis game, you can win the game only when the partner might choose some action that will eventually make me get the higher points and win the game. So this self-evident story can be kind of defined in this way. So same story in trade negotiation. South Korea had a trade negotiation with the United States. And we know the United States is a big enough country with the nuclear bomb. So whenever they feel, say, they have lost the card, just like Putin, Donald Trump says he will withdraw the U.S. Army from the South Korea. And then he knows that South Korea will make every possible concession in every negotiation. So in that context, what is the so-called optimal strategic actions that can be taken by South Korea in her negotiation with that tough guy, United States, especially led by unexpected, capricious Donald Trump? We should find out our best action that will eventually influence Donald Trump to choose some action that will be best for us. That's the reason why South Korean president went to the United States and has made all maximum level of flattery to Donald Trump. Why? Since he knew that Donald Trump is very weak to handle any types of flatteries, and he usually misunderstands that those flattery is a real kind of expression of some higher acknowledgement of his whatever simple enough, actually stupid enough guys. Anyhow, so in our discussion of optimal trade negotiation strategies, we will try to find out what is the best strategic action. Strategic action means action that can influence the other guy's choice that is best for my own welfare in the end. And so the other payoffs, there are other terminology like payoff would be the outcome of each negotiation and situation, and strategy would be a kind of a plan of action, and optimal strategy is the best strategies. And first, let's try to define cooperative game and non-cooperative game. So, game can be categorized roughly into two groups: cooperative game and non-cooperative game. And cooperative game maximize so-called joint welfare. Objective function is joint welfare. So we can say objective is maximize, to find some strategies that maximize joint welfare. Say only with binding contract. Only with so-called binding contract. Binding contract means if you choose some strategy that does not really maximize joint welfare, and you cheat me to choose to maximize your own welfare, that might damage my own welfare. So any types of deviation from cooperative strategy should provide actually lower welfare. That's the mechanism where this binding contract works. As we discussed in earlier world trade regimes, the initial idea to design WTO was WTO should be able to provide harsh enough punishment against any deviation to protective trade policy. That would be the example of cooperative game enforced by binding contract. So when these types of credible punishment against the deviation, which we call binding contract, does not work, always each player is supposed to choose, at least in one-shot game, to non-cooperative game. So we can say non-cooperative game is, we can say any game without binding contract, effective binding contract for cooperative game, which usually where each player maximize his or her welfare, disregarding, not caring about, given the competitors or competitors' strategies. So in non-cooperative game, player does not care about the other competitors' happiness or welfare. Just kind of consider the competitors' welfare or strategy as a given constraint. So as a given constraint defined by competitors' strategies, I just try to care about my own welfare and try to maximize my own welfare. And this is the usual case whenever this binding contract does not work at all. So we can say cooperative game would be a kind of exceptional case where this binding contract works. Or in repeated game, we also have found that most cases in repeated game, cooperative strategy might be a dominant strategies. And although we have, from our earlier discussion, we are already familiar, let's have a very short review of the core concept, which will be repeatedly show up in our discussion, starting with dominant strategies. So core concept of negotiation. And first would be dominant strategies. And we can think about the case where in earlier case, we have thought about let's use the exactly same examples instead of using new examples. So again, going back to United States and South Korea, we discussed with the free trade, and protective trade policies. In our earlier example, in this given example, we have seen that for basically Nash equilibrium strategies, Nash strategy means strategy that tried to maximize my own welfare given the other guy's strategies as a non-cooperative. So we are talking about in non-cooperative game. When do we have cooperative game? Only the binding contract works. Binding contract for cooperative game works. Otherwise, we can all regard all different types of game as non-cooperative game. In non-cooperative game, when you talk about Nash strategy, we only regard the other guys from Korean perspective just as a constraint. So given the other guy's choice of free trade, my best strategy is to choose a higher payoff. In this case, protective, same story. Given the other strategies, even from the U.S. perspective, given Korea's strategy to choose free, these are the best strategy. So Korea's best strategy is not affected by the U.S. strategy. Always choose protective strategy. Same story. So what do we mean by dominant strategy? Kind of my best strategy or your best strategy. When my best strategy is not affected or changed by the other player's choice, other players' strategies. That's the case. So in this example, both South Korea and both United States have a dominant strategy here. Then we can think about the other example case. For example, we can think about the case if this is changed to payoff is changed to 30 here, and if this is changed to 0, for example. Let's think about this example. If payoff is changed in this way, what would be the so-called Nash equilibrium? Again, South Korea will try to choose its best strategies given the other guy's strategies. If U.S. choose free trade, South Korea's best strategy would be choose free trade. And if U.S. choose protective trade policies, then from this option, definitely choose what protective policy is better strategies. Then from the United States, if South Korea choose free trade, definitely from U.S. perspective, 30 is better than 20. So this is best strategy. If South Korea choose protective, then again, protective is best strategies. In this case, do we have dominant strategy in this new game? No, there is no dominant case. Then in different case, here what we have is equilibrium is no more unique equilibrium as we discussed in the earlier example. Here we have multiple equilibria. So this is the example of so-called multiple equilibria. So if you have multiple equilibria, what will be the real outcome in realities? Nobody knows. It depends on the say, nobody can predict which equilibrium will be real outcome. Among these two outcomes, with some probability, this might be one outcome or this might be outcome. There is no real possible kind of certain prediction, which is kind of, we can say, perfect so-called uncertainty. So given this multiple equilibria, we will also try to find some strategy how this uncertainty caused by multiple equilibria can be addressed, say, eventually leading to expectable, stable, unique equilibrium. And the other kind of issues we need to think about would be so-called, the example would be, interesting issue would be so-called Maximin strategies. Okay. Especially, all these discussions have been based on our assumption of each player have a rational decision-making process. But however, the other issues we can think about would be so core concepts of negotiation. The other example would be Maximin strategies. So this is the if the other player is rational. What do we mean by rational? The guy always that makes a decision that maximizes his own welfare. But what would be the case if the other guy is irrational? Irrational case is the other guy choose sometimes an action that actually deteriorate or much worse kind of outcome to himself. And so if the other players is rational, always my best strategy is kind of just a niche strategy. Assuming that the other guys always choose best strategy for himself, then based on my own conjecture of the other players, his own welfare maximizing strategy, I will choose my best strategies. But if this rationality is quite suspicious and not a real reliable, and the other case, if the other players is irrational, or it means rational means the other guys is expectable. We can expect what would be his choice. When the other guy is irrational, it means we cannot rationally expect the other guy's choice, the other players' consistent choice. So when we can expect, we might have no expectation what will be the possible action that will be taken by the other guy, what we describe those guys irrational, including the case that he might choose kind of serious self-damaging kind of actions. In that case, what will be my best strategies? And we can think about the case, for example, we can think, for example, let's just follow our reading materials example and the negotiation between two firms, and they have two strategies. There's not invest in very expensive semiconductor line, and they invest with exactly same types of huge, massive semiconductor production line. So not invest. And invest. And just following the tariff payoff here. And the payoff given in our textbook would be minus 10, 10, and minus 100, 0, 20, 10. So given this payoff, in case firm 1 is sure, firm 2 is also rational, what would be the best strategy that can be taken by firm 1? When firm 1 can be sure that firm 2 is also rational. In that case, as in all the other example, assuming that firm 2 is rational, if he choose not invest, my best strategy is not to invest. And if he invests, my best strategy, this one. And from the perspective of firm 2, also given firm 1's strategy of not invest, best strategy is invest. And in case he does not invest, firm 2 will invest. So we can see here, firm 2 has a dominant strategy to choose invest. And from perspective of firm 1, it does not have dominant strategy. Its best strategy is changed depending on firm 2's choice. So given this case, anyhow, we can say this is the Nash equilibrium. So it is rational for firm 2 to choose invest, assuming firm 2 is rational. But however, let's think about the case that firm 2 has accumulated some reputation that he is not that much rational. He, from time to time, make decision with in a totally drunken state, or let's say he takes drug or whatever, irrational guy. In that case, if he is rational, we know that he is always supposed to choose investor strategy as a dominant strategy. But if we lose confidence and we have strong information that from time to time he behaves irrational way, then it is highly likely that he might just choose to not to invest, just came to have the situation simply despising or disliking every type of material gain. He suddenly came to be love, having nothing, to be a real, true, reliable person. If that kind of choice is highly likely, what would be the best strategy for firm 1? So in that case, we can say if firm 2 is irrational, firm 1 should minimize possible loss from the irrational choice, irrationality. So then firm 1 actually have figured out this guy might highly likely to choose not invest, confessing that having nothing is much better for a real, genuine, ethical human being instead of searching this vulgar material benefit. If that kind of choice is a possible case, then this loss is highly likely. So given this possibility of irrationalities, always firm 1's best choice is to minimize his possible loss. What is the biggest loss if he choose invest? This is the biggest loss. What is the biggest loss if he choose not to invest? So we can see that minus 10 is definitely better than minus 100 for rational firm 1. So what is the best strategy facing irrational partner? Strategy that minimize the possible loss. That's what we call maximin. Means we are comparing the minimum worst outcome, and we are choosing among the worst outcome from each choice, even some better among the worst outcome from each choice. That's what we call maximin strategy. When do we have to choose maximin strategies? Since we cannot really expect what will be taken by the other player. And actually, Kim Jong-un has made every effort to convince South Korea or United States that he is really crazy, that he might choose whatever action that South Korea and United States may not really expect at all. So if he really launch and start a nuclear war, it is 100% sure that North Korea will be annihilated if the nuclear war really happens. But Kim Jong-un tried to convince Donald Trump and South Korean leaders that he does not care to be annihilated and to be kind of disappear from the earth at all, since he is irrational. So since he is irrational, he claims that, and since he can start nuclear war anytime, as long as he feels like, since he does not care about tomorrow, whatever, and that kind of threat, he expect hopes might help in inducing Donald Trump and South Korean leader to comply to his demand. And actually, Donald Trump is doing exactly the same strategy. So we are watching a really ugly, funny kind of negotiation between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. Both guys try to convince that they are irrational. So they are trying to play so-called madman strategies. And each guy tried to show off, I'm much kind of completely mad than you, and that they are trying to convince each other that they are more irrational than each others. And let's figure out what will be the real credible madman strategy, or simply in reality we know that just their preference system is different. Donald Trump, to him, there is no tomorrow, no future. Today's pleasure is everything to Donald Trump. Kim Jong-un, he is simply very much worried to be kicked out from his position with such serious starvation in North Korea. So trying to show off he's just irrational guy, just induce so-called compliance from the negotiating partner. And also the other issue we need to discuss and define would be so-called the repeated game and one-shot game. Yeah. So other so-called core concept game would be so-called one-shot game and repeated game. And one-shot game, we have seen that always ends up with since there is no future, always in one-shot game, every player is supposed to choose so-called non-cooperative strategies. Non-cooperative Nash strategies. However, in repeated game, as we discussed before, as long as each guy choose the strategy of tit-for-tat strategies, or grim trigger strategies, we have seen that so-called cooperative strategies is actually Nash equilibrium strategies. As we have already discussed before, and some interesting issue would be what would be the case of so-called we can have two different types of repeated game. First would be so-called infinitely repeated game. Infinitely repeated game. In this case, this outcome that cooperative strategy is always a best Nash equilibrium strategy in infinite repeated game. But however, what would be the case of finitely repeated game? Let's think about the case that trade negotiation lasts only 20 years, 20 times, 20 years, 20 times predetermined trade negotiation. And however, in our earlier example, when you look at the why cooperative strategy is best strategy in repeated game, we have seen that in our earlier payoff, instead of this new payoff here, in our earlier payoff, given this payoff, we have seen that if game is repeated only 2 periods, still cooperative strategy have provided welfare dominant strategies. And so we can say if game is repeated, for example, 20 years, 20 period, definitely, as long as this game is repeated more than 2 period, we can say to choose free trade provides a higher payoff. So another homework. Think seriously about if everybody knows that negotiation will be ended after 20 years. So currently, after 20 years, there will be no negotiation, and that then Jesus Christ will come back, or Earth will explode. And when we know for certain that when the game is ended, it will be ended after 20 times repeated game, do you think still cooperative strategy can provide higher payoff? As we have examined in our earlier example, given this types of payoff, we have seen just a repetition of the game over 2 periods provides a higher payoff from cooperative strategy. Will it still same when you know the game will be ended after 20 times negotiation? Think seriously about what will be the logic in the last period and what will be the logic just before the last period. And that will be provide us some funny new insight on this finitely repeated game and what will be the real kind of response in reality. We know that the solar system is supposed to be ended at some point. Solar will explode and to change a small dwarf, white dwarf star after the explosion. So we know that it will be ended at some point. And so thinking about all those possible expected end of the repeated game, what would be the best strategy? Homework. And let's continue our discussion of all different core concept of negotiation, and also try to figure out some really fascinating tool to figure out the source of bargaining power, how those bargaining power will influence, and what types of bargaining power is a really influential and reliable bargaining power next week. Okay, that's it for this week's discussion, and see you next week.